Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Almost with one voice, the world has condemned President Trump's decision to abandon the Paris Climate Accord, although the UK declined to sign a letter, as you've heard, from other European nations. Mr. Trump and his officials called the decision refreshing, insisting it would save millions of American jobs. But industry bosses and state officials have pledged to continue efforts to cut greenhouse gas emissions. Our Washington correspondent Kylie Morris reports.
Cool jazz on one of the hottest days of the year. It was a garden party for those whose denial of climate change and rejection of global deals had left them out in the cold for years. But their time had come. They perspired quietly as they waited for the president to announce America was walking away from the Paris Agreement.
In order to fulfill my solemn duty to protect America and its citizens, the United States will withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord.
There were caveats that followed, even suggesting re-entry if a fairer deal for America could be done. But within the hour, France, Italy and Germany had said no way. The UK didn't sign on to that, but criticised the decision. That was just background noise, though, to those in the Rose Garden.
All of the Fortune 500 in America were against him. All of the world leaders were against him. His daughter was against him. Some of his advisors were all over the place. And he made a decision that I think was the right decision. A hard win, but he made it.
The president framed it as putting America first, prioritising jobs at home over an agreement that he says favours other nations at the expense of the United States.
We don't want other leaders and other countries laughing at us anymore, and they won't be. They won't be. I was elected to represent the citizens of Pittsburgh, not Paris.
But neither the citizens of Pittsburgh nor Paris appreciated his sentiment. The mayor of Pittsburgh joined a chorus of city and state leaders renewing their commitment to the agreement the president had just rejected.
This city does not support the initiatives that he is doing. This city is adamantly opposed to it. And for him to then use this city as his example of who he is elected to represent, he's not representing us at all, or not very well.
There was passion, too, from President Macron in Paris, inviting American scientists to take refuge in France.
Because wherever we live, whoever we are, we all share the same responsibility. Make our planet great again.
Donald Trump might not represent Paris, France, but he does Paris, Maryland. Here, Donald's Way intersects with Old Paris Road before you drive down to Chesapeake Bay. At the thrift shop, they were sweating over the president's decision.
You as an ally, France, you know, he's taken all of those people off. And why would you want to do something like that? You know, we're all friends, we've taken care of each other all these years, and then all of a sudden, he's trying to take us away from that.
People are going to be fighting for green energy no matter what. So we're trying to save money, and I think that's the way to go, without having to pay, what, $100 billion to developing nations. I think we could use our $100 billion ourselves.
The Trump administration's already shaving billions from environmental programs at home. Funding for a major cleanup of Chesapeake Bay is at risk.
To have it not get that guarantee of keeping it clean and having water rise and having the acceleration in the climate change is very upsetting.
So even though it feels like a kind of global issue, it's also very much a local issue for you.
It's global and local, and there is nobody who is not going to be affected.
The view from Trump supporters is this is all turning out exactly as the president promised. But for others, this is not so much America first as America flying solo.
We've just been hearing from the EPA Director, Scott Pruitt, who's been echoing the kind of language of the President yesterday, saying that this agreement was all about Europe shackling the United States, saying that the US is not going to contribute a single cent more toward a UN global fund for fighting climate change, and saying that the US no longer regards itself as bound by any emissions limits set out in the agreement. But interesting, I think, there to hear from the Pittsburgh Mayor, Boston mayor, the governors of California, of New York, of Washington State, all of whom have said, look, the president has made this agreement, but we're already too far down the road and we are going to continue our fight against climate change. Even Rex Tillerson, the Secretary of State, has just said that regardless of the decision that was taken by the president, that the US will keep reducing greenhouse gas emissions. But this is Donald Trump as, disruptor in chief. It is a role that he absolutely relishes. I think it also represents a return to power of some of the nationalists within his inner circle, like Steve Bannon. So he thrives in these moments and is certainly, playing his strongest game, I think, to convince people that this is exactly what he promised and that he is delivering. But when you come to a place like this, where there is a very keen awareness of climate change issues, people are concerned about rising sea levels, they're concerned about changes in weather and their local industries, their businesses, their homes. They are taking a very long view and they don't necessarily like what they see. They don't like what the president has done.
Carly, thank you very much.
And we return to that issue of climate change, and in the absence of America, it was China and Europe who came together today and pledged to unite to save the planet, a sight few could have predicted 5 years ago. President Trump announced his withdrawal on Thursday, saying he believed that to participate in the pact would be to undermine the US economy, wipe out jobs and put his country at a permanent disadvantage. Is that how the rest of the world sees it? Well, joining us now, Todd Stern, former advisor on climate change to President Obama, who was the United States chief negotiator on that 2015 Paris Climate Agreement. Very nice to speak to you, Todd Stern. How damaged do you believe America is by this?
Thanks very much, Emily. It's a pleasure to be here. Look, I think it was a terrible decision. I think that this is bad for the United States in all sorts of ways. I mean, it's bad for the world, bad for climate change, but it's also a big diplomatic hit generally for the United States because, in diplomacy, a country's reputation and standing and credibility matter above all. And I think that what the rest of the world is going to see here is that the United States has given them a slap in the face. The Trump administration, President Trump, has given other countries a slap in the face. Countries were hugely invested in this deal. It took years of work to get it done. It's a balanced, fair, and universal agreement. The first time a real, durable, and effective climate regime has been established after all of these years of trying. And there's just, I see no case, no legitimate case for having pulled out. So I think it's going to be quite damaging for the U.S.
I don't know if you heard Boris Johnson a moment ago saying, well, actually, Bill Clinton never ratified Kyoto. Is that an equitable arrangement?
I did hear that, and I think there's no legitimate comparison there. I mean, the reality is that it's not a question of whether Bill Clinton, who I worked for, by the way, ratified Kyoto. Kyoto was an agreement that had a structure and a formation that had, in reality, no chance of getting ratified in the U.S. Senate. That was too bad. We wanted it to happen, but it just wasn't going to happen, and it wasn't because Clinton didn't try.
So do you think now that China is actually taking America's place? Is it emerging as, the savior of the planet?
Well, I don't think China is the savior of the planet, but I will say that I'm glad that China is making clear that they intend to stay in the agreement and to continue with their pledges. That's important. Obviously, the U.S. and China together, the work that we did together, the diplomacy we did together was enormously important to getting the agreement done. And it's a good thing that China wants to stay in. It's going to be also, I think, enormously important that Europe, including the UK, step up and play a leadership role, and many other countries around the world. So I wouldn't at all look at China as a savior. That would be a real mistake. But China is an important player. There are many other important players. China, as the world's largest emitter at this point, by far, obviously has a responsibility, and I'm glad to hear that President Xi Jinping seems to be saying that they intend to meet that responsibility.
Todd Stern, thank you very much indeed. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.
I've been getting away with it.